Replacing the tip of a prong because of wear and tear or because one is broken off is a very common repair. Here on the top we can see a normal claw where there's enough metal holding the stone down. If it's because of wear and tear like this one here, usually all of them will be worn fairly evenly or the two at each end a little bit more, but if it's because of wear and tear, usually it's best to retip all of them at the same time. Or if it's because of a broken claw or broken prong, then you might just repair the one. Sometimes a claw is so broken that we have to replace the entire thing from lower down. So as you can see in here, a plate has been soldered to replace the entire tip. This can be done with the stone in or the stone out, as in this case. Before proceeding, we just need to clean the tip of that prong because it usually will be rounded if it's worn, or it could be jaggedy if it's broken. So hopefully there's a little bit of metal left there. Again, if there's nothing, you may have to retip from lower, but if there's a little bit, you will gently file and even things out at the very top. To prepare the little tip that we will be attaching on top, we will use, first of all, the same carat, the same metal as the setting we're replacing. So if it is a 14 karat white gold setting, you need to use a little bit of 14 karat to make your tip. So to have perfectly even tips, you can use very thin wire and make very, very small jump rings. This works really well if you're replacing all of the tips onto a setting. That way they're all matching. If you're only doing one, you can just cut a little bit of wire. I use my charcoal brick to make a perfect little ball. I make a little indentation with my burr, and then I will melt this little bit of metal into a round little ball. If it oxidizes, pickle, of course. We then need to flatten this little ball. So I put a little bit of flux on my steel block, and I'm going to take tweezers and just grab a little bit of flux so my little balls don't go flying when I'm hammering them down. So using any metal hammer, just give it a smack, and then you'll have a little bit of a flattened ball for your tip in the steel block right away. If you do a lot of retipping, you may purchase ready prongs. They're just little tiny balls flattened with soldered, pre-applied, ready to go of different carat. Before soldering the little tips on, we need to protect the stones. So stones that can take the heat are diamonds and stones in the sapphire family. These can be retipped directly on the stone. However, they need to be protected. Always have a cover ready so you can cover your container in case that it catches on fire. It is a very dangerous thing to have at the bench because of the torch that we also use. So be ready to close it calmly if it catches on fire, and always wear an apron to protect yourself. Once you've dipped your ring, put it in your third hand and light it on fire. Of course, you have covered your little container of alcohol before doing that. You will see that the boric acid that was dissolved in the alcohol is now coating the entire ring, and more importantly, coating our stone. And that's what will give it a protectant, a layer of glass to protect it from the heat. If you don't have enough on the stone, you can reapply a little bit with a brush so you have a nice thick coating, especially for sapphires. Diamonds are a little bit more resistant. I put my flux brush nearby so I have something to dip my little tips onto and apply on the ring. You want to heat up your ring gently. You don't want to have any fast thermal changes when retipping. So you can start by gently warming your stone and your ring, obviously. And again, no draft nearby, nothing, no changes in, no sudden changes in temperature. Once your prong is hot enough, we will grab our little prong that we made earlier, put a little bit of flux, and grab some solder and pre-melt your solder under the tip. Now you could put your tip directly first and then add the solder beside, but you can pre-melt onto the tip as well. Next is to heat up your claw to melt the solder onto it. So you don't want to heat up very high because that little prong is alone and it's going to get much too hot and melt back into a little ball. So you want to heat up lower, heat up the claw itself. And again, you may need to add a little bit of solder if there wasn't enough to have a really good connection between the tip and the rest of the claw. Sometimes the stone, if it's a colored stone, will change color a little bit. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but it will come back after gently cooling. So once you're done, you do not want to quench this, obviously, or you'll end up with a bunch of tiny little stones instead of a big one. You let it cool completely before pickling. And now you can see after pickling, we have a nice little tip well soldered to the claw. And now we just need to clean that little tip and make it match the other one. So if you're only doing one, you need to file gently without touching the stones, not to damage. You need to file gently to make it match to the rest of them. If you're retipping all of them, you want to obviously make them all the same. And obviously they will be taller, but not excessively tall. You want it to be smooth and not catching. If possible, match the style that was there before. Sometimes you can tell if they were pointed or more round, etc. You can also use a cup burr to do this, being very careful not to damage the stone and also not to damage the other side of the claw. And then you would finish with a little rubber wheel, just smoothing all around. Again, without touching the stone. And then always check your tip on a sweater to see if it's catching, because if it is catching, the client will come back for you to smooth out the tip. So always check, keep either a little bit of wool sweater or something at your bench and always see if it's catching and keeping little bits of fluff in there, or even worse, completely hooking onto the sweater. And then you would repolish as one normally does. And there you go, our perfect little tip. You should not be able to tell which one was retipped.